What's up, Nachliel?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I have to say I've been wanting to schmooze with you for a really long time. I think I've been paying attention to you on Instagram for like maybe 3, 4 years, maybe even longer. And and I know that like you are a very intellectually curious person, because you created what you created with this whole like museum tours from an orthodox perspective.
Hmm.
But you know what? Actually, I should just let you tell me about yourself rather than me trying to talk it out. You could tell me better. Who are you?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's really nice to actually to meet you. I've been also watching from afar what you're doing with your different men's beard products and things like that. I love the branding Aleph instead of alpha male. I really like that. Um, I'm from originally from the old city, and I think that that's a very important part because growing up in the old city of Jerusalem, specifically in the late '80s, early '90s, the old city of Jerusalem was a very different kind of place than it is today. It was less about Burger's Bar and more about spirituality. They didn't have all these commercialized programs going on. And I grew up playing in the dirt and learning about archaeology by climbing on Hezekiah's wall, which my parents' house is directly on top of. And my father also is a tour guide and an educator. Some know him. His name is Barnea Selavan, a very well-known tour guide. So I grew up with that as just playing in the dirt was fun, and it's somehow connected to who we are, and it has thousands of years of history. And I brought that with me as a formal teacher into the classroom when I went to teachers college. And at a certain point, I realized that just telling students in the classroom about archaeology isn't enough. And this took a few years to figure out, but I was in New Jersey. I was teaching at a Montessori school in 2015, 2016. And we decided to do a day trip to the Met. And we spent an entire day at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And when I prepared that tour, I went to visit a few times. I slowly realized that this is the way to do things. Instead of talking about archaeology in the classroom, bring the classroom to see the world, to see archaeology from around the world in the largest institutions that have archaeology, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and others as well, as I discovered. And I realized that there's just so much you can do here because you can move around and you can connect, you can engage, and you're in a space that is more conducive to this kind of, you know, thinking and learning and excitement. So that started a journey. It didn't immediately happen, but when I started doing this in the museum, I suddenly realized this is what I was born to do. And the rest is history, but that's how it started.
It's so interesting. It sounds like what you're actually talking about is informal education.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I did come from a background of martial arts. I was a capoeira instructor for about 7 years in Jerusalem before I moved to the States to teach. So I actually started in formal education and I sort of found my way into formal education and felt a little bit restricted there, like a bird in a cage. I needed to spread my wings and not just teach in one school, but to engage with many students in many schools in different countries. Yeah, it took a while to
Wow.
be able to spread my wings, but I always felt
hmm
constricted inside of school.
So wow, there's some resonations going on for me because I came to the old city of Jerusalem in 1998,
Hmm.
and that was before Mamilla,
Yeah,
before,
that was before the Intifada.
before the
Like,
second intifada.
yeah, the second
Um, and
Intifada.
and
Mm.
like it radically changed my life. It radically changed my life. I mean, just being in I just got drunk on being in the old city.
Wow, tell me
Um,
more. Like,
well, first of all, like when you talk about Hezekiah's wall, so it's like I did the Israelite program with Rabbi Benny Friedman and Rabbi David Aaron on Misgav Ladach
yeah,
Street.
yeah, yeah.
And I used to go to Slatana Midlow's apartment, if you know Slatana Midlow.
Slotana, wow,
She
wow.
she was like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know
she
exactly who she is.
she was my Rebbitzin, and I remember passing the Hezekiah's wall because you just walk right, you like walk
That's on the way
past it
to her
on
house.
it's
Yeah.
on the way to her house, and that was the thing, was it was like as a Jew, for me growing up, I was basically white. I was like white. It's like if you ask me what my cultural background. I was white. Like I was jealous of Irish and Italian people because like they had some sort of background, and I didn't know what it meant to be Jewish. For me, Jewish was like Woody Allen and bagels and lox, and it was like
Wow.
incredibly assimilated, just so assimilated.
It's like
So when
Mel
I
Brooks
came,
Jews, you know. For Mel
yeah,
Brooks, even the Jews in the Spanish Inquisition say "oi." You
right,
know?
right. It was like very what I would now call like gullus Judaism, like gullus
Hmm.
identity, just like totally in exile from the truth of like this spiritual lineage going back to the prophet Abraham, communing with the creator of the universe in the desert, and then like the temple in Jerusalem, and like all of these incredible epic artifacts, archetypes of consciousness that have been resonating throughout history and our psyche,
Hmm.
and the world for thousands of years. I had no idea that that was inside me actually until I came to the Kotel. And so I was doing Israel. It was my first day there. And this girl's like, "Do you want to go to the Kotel?" I got into an argument with like the whole group. And then afterwards, I was schmoozing with this one girl. And I was like, she's like, "Do you want to go to the Kotel?" I'm like, "What's the Kotel?" And she's like, she's like the Western Wall. I'm like, "What's the Western Wall?" She's like, "The Wailing Wall." I'm like, "Oh, the Wailing Wall. Yeah, sure." Right? Obviously, as a Gullus Jew, it has to be associated with sadness,
Yeah.
right? The Wailing Wall. Then I recognize it. Oh, the wall where Jews cry, you know? Um, and then I remember going down the steps, and at the time I was an agnostic, and I remember saying to myself, like, I'm going to see a really big wall made of really big bricks that's really old, and nothing is going to happen. Like, that's what I said
Hmm.
to myself going down. And then when we got to the Cotel Plaza, I was like standing there on the balcony looking at the Cotel, and I remember saying to myself, like, I'm not even gonna go up to the wall. I don't want to like be like those religious people. I'm not even gonna go up to the wall. Right. But
Gonna
then I
keep
was
my safe
standing there.
distance and observe. Yeah,
Exactly.
an
Exactly.
observant Jew.
I
You
didn't
know.
want to be one of those crazy religious people.
Hmm.
And then I started feeling like this energy coming off of the wall, and I wasn't on anything. I was clean and sober, and all of a sudden I started feeling this energy, and then I looked down and I saw that my hands were shaking, and then something inside me was like, I want to go to the wall. And I didn't know where that was coming from. And so I decided to go around, and I walked down the ramp to the wall, and I saw people like going like this on the wall. So like I went like this and put my head on the wall, and something inside me from very, very deep, I don't even know where it came from because I didn't grow up this way at all. I grew up eating bacon, egg, and cheese on a bagel. But something inside me said, I am home. I am
Yeah.
home. And I don't know where it came from. I didn't even know that like at the end of the Haggadah we say next year in Yerushalayim. Like I didn't even know
Wow.
that like Jews had been praying for over 2,000 years to return to this spot that I just returned to. But something inside me did, and that's actually the root of my emuna.
Wow. That's a very powerful experience. It's a powerful encounter in the center of things where the world, that's where the world was created. It's all there, and it has a power, even if you weren't indoctrinated or anything. If you're aware, it connects. I've
Yeah.
seen some really crazy stuff there. I mean, you know, like I mean, Jerusalem syndrome is just the tip of the iceberg. Like for good and for bad, I've seen people just like open up there in a way that they didn't believe they could. Yeah. And some people can't
Yeah.
handle it and they go cuckoo, and that's Jerusalem
Mm-hmm.
syndrome.
Yep. Yeah, I've witnessed Jerusalem syndrome, man. I've witnessed Jerusalem syndrome.
Hmm. Yeah.
I when I was on Kibbutz Eliyahu, I saw this guy. Um, he was like manic, and all of a sudden he like just started talking crazier and crazier, and then eventually like we realized we had to take him to the hospital, and then when we got to the
Wow.
hospital he started like eating cigarette butts off the ground
Oh
because he was
my.
trying to arouse God's mercy. And he managed to like fake being crazy at the doctor's office, and then our guy who was running our kibbutz program was like, no, he really is, like we have to take him to the hospital. And then like somehow I was his camp. I am like one of my roles is like universal camp counselor. And I feel like that's sort of like you as well. It's just like part of my personality is like wherever I go, I'm kind of like a camp counselor. I'm like
Hmm.
God's camp counselor for the like creation. And And it's like, so for whatever reason, I was the one who was like taking care of this guy. So I'm like taking him to the hospital. I'm in the bathroom with him, and and I'm standing between him and the garbage because he wants to eat out of the garbage.
Oh
Like
my
he's
God.
trying to eat garbage. And I'm like, and then like, again, because he wants to arouse God's divine mercy. And whatever, long story short, he ended up visiting with the doctors, taking off his clothes in front of all the doctors and declaring himself the Messiah. And then he got locked up. Um,
With
and
20
like,
other messiahs.
yeah, right? So it's like I've seen Jerusalem syndrome. It's like there really is a
Yeah.
spiritual energy here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Believe me, if we were just to talk about Jerusalem syndrome, there's so many stories.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember there was one lady, there's one African lady who was convinced that she's King David. She wore a harp on her head, a golden harp, wore purple. You ever know? She had a little bit of a beard, so in her defense,
Yeah, I think I
she's
remember
a
her
character.
walking around the old city back in the
Yeah, that was
day.
98. It was more or less then.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I remember her. Wow, maybe you were one of those little kids chasing her. These
Nah,
little
I
kids.
wasn't that
Yeah.
mean. But I
Okay,
once
that's
tried
good.
to be in the background when they were doing some interview for some
Mhm.
newspaper. I just asked, "Can I just be in the background while this happens?" And that was in the
Mhm.
center of town near the Mashbir.
Mhm. So okay, so you grew up in the old city.
Yeah, yeah.
And then where did you go from there? And then why is your English like you have like no Israeli accent?
I know. People usually ask me how is my Hebrew so good? And I say it's the other way around.
Mhm.
'Cause I'm
Yeah.
born in Jerusalem. My parents made Aliyah and met in Israel. They made an Aliyah independently. My father from Pittsburgh and my mother from Atlanta, and they made a choice to speak to the kids one parent in one language, so there was consistency. And basically, I spoke English at home and Hebrew in the street and in school, which is the same thing I do with my kids. And hopefully, it sticks. So with me, it really stuck. And with my younger siblings, I have four other siblings. I'm the oldest of five. So they all speak English, but I think I'm the most convincing. So
Mhm.
they most of them, especially the younger ones, have more of an Israeli accent. They're much more acculturated to Israel. But my parents didn't know the Israeli culture that well yet, so I didn't get the Israeli stuff at home. And on the other hand, they didn't want to bring over a lot of the American Gullus stuff, so they didn't give me that either. So in a sense, part of my rebellion is to rediscover the music that they deliberately did not play at home. And like my mother's like, yes, of course I know Elton John,
Mhm.
or whatever. But so they wanted to sort of create something new, and they were learning as they went about it. So I got the blunt of the English, and
Mm.
I also made a choice to focus on my English when I had a seventh grade uh, sabbatical year. A friend who was his parents were doing a sabbatical year for his bar mitzvah in Israel, and he came to our classroom and didn't speak any Hebrew, and he needed somebody who speaks English. I was one of the few, maybe two English speakers in the classroom, and then I got really impressed by, oh wow, English is a really cool language, and I really put in an effort to speak it better as opposed to
Mhm.
talking English. So I put in an
Talking
effort in
English.
yes in seventh grade. I really put in an effort to work on my English.
Hmm. Wow.
But
And
then
so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
From the old city. I mean, my parents still live there. So, I mean, when I finished high school, I went to yeshiva, I went to college, I moved to the States for a few years. I mean, the rest is history. But my parents are still in the old city, and I still like
Okay.
to visit, although I find that the old city is so different than like every place, it's the nostalgia. It's very different than when it used to be, and I find it a lot harder to connect on that level. There's just so many
So
distractions
you want to know what's
there.
interesting is that like I still feel like a very powerful connection at the Kotel. I
Hmm.
wouldn't say I don't feel suffused in the same way because it has become way more touristy and kind of like shiny, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but uh, but I went to the Temple Mount yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Do you go to the Temple Mount?
No, I do not.
Is that like halachically? Like it's like
It's
for
it's a
halachic reasons?
combination of things. There is the halachic part, which is not an excuse. You could figure it out. There's a lot of authorities. I mean, I grew up next to was it Dr. Yaakov Rogan, I think, who wrote
Mm-hmm.
about this a lot. My Rosh Yeshiva in high school was Rav Yisrael Ariel, the founder of the Temple Institute. I mean, these are people who are very influential in my life. Philosophically, I feel that that's not the right time to focus on that. That's where I'm coming from.
Can you explain more? What do you mean when you say
Yeah.
philosophically?
So the question is, the main question is, I'm going back to the Gemara, which says that the in any generation that the temple hasn't been rebuilt, it's as if it has been destroyed, which is coming to say that the reasons for its destruction need to be addressed, as opposed to mechanically building the building and hoping
Mm-hmm.
that it'll work itself out. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the general approach. And the question is, how do we go about bringing its rebuilding in a way that won't lead to its destruction? Within 5 days of internal
Mm-hmm.
conflict just amongst
Mm-hmm.
ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, I actually from that philosophical perspective, I agree with you because if we were to force it now, it would be like this altar was sponsored by the Harry and Judy Rothberg Foundation,
Yeah, the
and y-
Steinhardt. Yeah.
right, like this Kior was, from congregation, it'll be like, yeah, it would be highly problematic. For me, it's more like I'm like, listen, I'm an Am Haaretz. I've decided to declare myself an Am Haaretz because I just don't know nearly enough Torah to 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 speak with certainty about many things. I can speak with certainty about a lot of basic things. But so in terms of the Temple Mount, I'm relying on the fact that there's great precedence among many people who are Shomer Halacha who
Yeah.
go to the Temple Mount. And
Yeah.
so it's like I'm leaning on that.
Yeah.
And then
I mean,
I'm not really for
well, there's
I'm
a difference between trying to build it as opposed to attending it. I understand there's a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I go there in order to pray. I go there
Yeah.
in order to pray. And so, we do the circuit around the perimeter. We
Yeah.
don't
Sivuv
actually.
Sharim. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm just praying. And it's a very powerful place to pray. And I brought it up because I still feel tremendous spiritual energy at the Kotel, but there is a different quality there on the Temple
For
Mount.
sure.
Um and and it's not as glitzy, it's not as shiny. It's
And
not
there's still
it's
a struggle. It's still a struggle.
yeah,
It's like you
yeah,
go to the Koto now, and the interior design of the part that's under Wilson's Arch and the men's section is so glamorous. It's like I think the architect is the same architect of Ben Gurion Airport. It doesn't feel like the Kotel. It feels like a glorified show, and they built that. This is me just venting as someone who grew up
sure.
there. They have this multi-million-dollar glass paneling and beautiful Aron Kodesh, and a special tucked away little VIP show. And I looked at it, I'm like, on the one end, it is amazing, but to glorify a synagogue in the place of the destruction just seems to me a contradiction in terms. It's not a synagogue. Synagogues are all trying to somehow connect to the place that was destroyed. So you don't turn that place into a synagogue. So that really bothers me. And I feel that that makes it more and more difficult. But if you, there's all the gold and glass, and like you said, these names everywhere. You go up to the Temple Mount, and you still have to deal with even our own people saying you can't pray here, you can't this, and you have to
Mhm.
fight to it. And
And
Yehuda Glick
there's
got
certainly
shot,
like
trying
there's an
to.
awareness that like if these guards weren't around me, I very possibly would be lynched, literally. I
Yeah,
literally would be lynched if I
yeah.
was
So
walking up here
so
without these
it's
guards.
it's a good reminder of where we're at. That's for sure.
Yeah. And that's the thing that is it's like if we can make peace in Jerusalem, there really will be world peace.
Yeah, it's the hardest one. It's the hardest
It's the
one.
hardest one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's
So
it's yeah.
speaking of peace in Jerusalem and perspectives and narratives and intellectual honesty, I perceive you to be somebody who has also gone into like the academic perspective of history and isn't simply holding by how do you say, the party line.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'm begrudgingly an academic, and I keep on telling my wife I hate being called an academic. I hate academia, and she's like, "Listen, you have two MAs. You're an academic, whether you like it or not."
right, so
And
so
and
so so how do you reconcile, the academic, perspective versus the like, let's
well,
start with like a bit.
what's the question? Like, what specific? This
Well,
is a very broad
let me
question.
ask you a question like this, and like, do you believe that Hashem created the world in 7 24-hour days?
No, No. So I don't believe that there is any traditional Jewish commentator who expects us to believe that. We're talking Rashi, Ramban, the various midrashim. God created the world, and the idea of 7 days is not 7 24-hour days. It's 7 phases, and they're there to give us an understanding of the meaning of creation, as opposed to being a fly on the wall watching creation happen. And this is so poignant that the very first commentary on the Torah, Rashi says, like, this isn't like, why do we even need this here? Just start from the mitzvot, start from the first commandment, give it to the Jewish people leaving Egypt. And Ramban, Nachmanides, takes this even further by saying, not only is this not like an accurate depiction of how creation happened, like you couldn't glean that information out of these verses if you wanted to. So why confuse people? So it must be there for another purpose. And then he goes on and on explaining, how creation works and the evolution of humanity and morality. And then what does it mean that God gave us the land? From a moral perspective, when you look at the history of the various nations that lived in the land of Israel, the land of Canaan, and the land spit them out because of their behavior, and you have to have a historic perspective and down to the minutia of the way the world is created in this sense. Like, where does humanity fit in its relationship to animals, in relationship to birds, and so on? So that's the picture that I look at, and so I don't see any necessity to struggle with the technicalities of age of the universe and things like that. Like, I don't think there was ever an intention to present the world in that way, which is, we haven't really thought historically in historic terms like that until till about 200 years ago anyway. Like, the genre wasn't a historic genre. That's
Can
where
you
I'm
say
coming
more
from.
about what you mean when you say the genre wasn't a historic
So
genre?
people didn't really write histories as an observer objectively trying to describe the way things occurred, especially when it comes to creation stories. Um, so, the Jewish story of creation puts God in the center, and humanity is part of that story with a mission, going hand in hand with God. That is a unique story. No other culture in the world has that story. If you read the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth, or you go through Egyptian creation myths, or whichever, they always place the gods as multiple gods in the center, who are basically families with squabbles, who are creating the world and humanity to basically serve them. And whenever humanity doesn't serve them what they need to eat and to sleep, they crush them or bring the flood upon them. There's no morality in there. There's nothing you could take out of that and how to behave better as a human being. It doesn't strengthen our connection with God. And if anything, you fear God and you do crazy things to please him, whatever it is he wants. It can be even human sacrifice. So the Torah's perspective rips all of that away and gives you a complete reorientation of how to look at the world. So that's not a historic discussion. That's a moral discussion. That's a philosophical discussion. That's a meaningful discussion, right? It's not there to give you history. The interest in history after the scientific revolution, it starts moving on. People start trying to piece together ancient history, and then they make the mistake of trying to do historic readings of ancient texts. And the academic world obviously doesn't treat the Torah any different than any other text. It's just like, it's an ancient text, and let's analyze it using our different tools and arrive at certain conclusions. And you miss a lot when
Mhm.
you do that. And obviously we know that, but they're basically saying, let's look at it contextually, compare it to different literary styles of the time, and all kinds of things like that. But they don't take it seriously. They just try to understand what here is literal, what is not, and that's it. And they leave the rest at the door, and you miss the main point.
So it's almost like they're looking at the Torah from a scientific rationalist perspective.
Right. And I think that's a mistake. Like, nobody would attempt to do that to the Odyssey and the Iliad, right? Even though that's a
Mhm.
different genre. But it's like, you
Mhm.
understand that even though we now know, actually this was only fairly recently proven, the Battle of Troy did happen, obviously not in the mythological way that it's described in the
Mhm.
Iliad, but we know
Mhm.
that there was a battle there. The archaeological remains have been found, and it was transformed over time to to Greece's foundational story. But we don't
Mm-hmm.
expect it to be scrutinized in the way people scrutinize the Torah, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously leaning on a foundation of historic events. That's for sure.
So
But
then how do you understand something like Har Sinai? Because it's like, am I supposed okay, so fine. So I don't have to take the 7 days of creation literally.
you
Do I
take them
need to take Har
seriously, not literally.
right? Do I need to take Har
Yeah.
Sinai literally? Because if I'm just gonna tell you how
Um,
I look at it. Like if I'm
mhm.
honest with myself, if I'm honest with myself, I believe that something happened, that there
For
was
sure.
a revelation. I believe there was some kind of collective revelation that happened to the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I don't. But beyond that, I'm not. And you know, in terms of like, is is it exactly as it was described historically in the Torah? Um, I believe that there's certainly some resonation, but I don't know if it's one to one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on this, that there had to have been a revelation because that's the premise of what the Torah is. It's a message to humanity from the Creator saying humanity is in partnership with the Creator to go somewhere. So that can't be a bootstrap operation. It can't be us creating it. It needs to come from outside. But the revelation is far and in between, and God, even to Abraham, barely reveals himself. Abraham has to figure it out on his own. So a lot of humanity is, we have to figure things out. In terms of revelation, I agree with you. I believe 100% that there had to be some kind of revelation. um, I don't find it, with right now having gone through academia, I don't find, I would be dishonest if I would say it literally happened with 2 million people. Because we, even
Mm-hmm.
just in terms of the ability for Egypt to sustain such a large uh, um, population, not to mention a slave population subjugated by a superior just look in terms of resources and how much room you need for people to live in, and what Egypt looks like, so there's a lot of things that don't work, and there's often what people do. In fact, this very question is what kick-started Wellhausen in his famous biblical criticism. Like, this was the question when he suddenly realized, like, we have Egypt, we have the biblical text, there's no way to make it fit, right? So what do? So you throw out the baby with the bathwater, or say, okay, let's look at this like adults. Like, okay, there's a kernel of truth here, there's a reality here, and God is giving us a very powerful message, and we are bringing this message. We have changed the world with this message. It's a real message. It's
Mm-hmm.
transformative. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean it had to be 2 million people. It could be that there's different discussions about typological numbers. It's a slippery slope, but um, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be taken 100% literally, but definitely taken seriously. There's a revelation,
Yeah, I
you know.
the way tell me what you think about this, and
Mhm.
really like for me, I just need to say the truth is an inquiry. Like the truth is an inquiry. Like I have faith, I have emuna that Hashem wants me to keep the Torah and mitzvot. I have
Yeah.
emuna that Hashem wants the Jewish people to keep the Torah and mitzvot. Not exactly according to like not that, and when I say that, I don't mean I don't think Hashem wants everyone to be from. You know what I'm saying? That's not what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah. I
You
mean,
know. It,
absolutely. I hear. I mean, this also, as a historian, my main field is history, and there is so much of what we consider today Judaism, which would have been, in the very least, surprising to the very rabbis that we are quoting. Rabbi
oh, give me
Akiva,
some.
Rabbi.
Give me some.
Yeah. So, for example, there's a very famous story in the Talmud about Moshe Rabbeinu visiting Rabbi Akiva's shir. Okay, it's a very famous story. We usually put them up against each other. Moshe gave us the written Torah, and Rabbi Akiva basically preserved oral Torah, Torah Shebaal Peh. And he was killed after the Bar Kokhba revolt by Hadrian, by the Romans in Caesarea. So very distant periods. And the story goes like this: Moshe goes up to the heavens, and he goes up at Har Sinai, and he sees God tying on those little crowns onto the letters. And he goes, Master of the universe, like who would stop you if you didn't do this? Like, would anybody know the difference? So God tells Moshe, there's going to be a rabbi in many, many generations. His name is Rabbi Akiva, and he is going to glean mountains of information out of the tippity top, the little spike on top of a yud. Tilei tilim shel halachot mikutzo shel yud. So Moshe says, show him to me. So God basically sends him into the vortex. He goes and then he appears in Rabbi Akiva's shir. Now, according to there's a few more commentators that fill in some of the information. They say that the way Rabbi Akiva's shir was organized is everybody sat in rows, and the rows were based on merit. So Moshe was able to sit in the 8th or the 18th row, something like that. In other words, he can't
At
even
the
make it to the
back.
front line. Right, he's sitting in the back. And he's sitting and listen to Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva, as we know, I mean, he is the midrashic mastermind. I mean, the way he connects things and finds. So he's giving this whole class, and Moshe Rabbeinu is sitting there saying, I have no idea what he's talking about. How is he? What is going on? And then one of the students raises his hand and he says, Rabbi, how do you know this? And Rabbi Akiva says, Halacha Moshe Misinai. This is as it was given to Moses at Sinai. And then Moshe says, oh, at least I've achieved something. Like, wow, like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean he necessarily understood how he got there, but he understood that he laid down the foundation for getting there. Now,
So what you're talking
there's
about, just I feel like you have to say it. What you're talking about, for those who don't know, is the oral
yeah,
Torah.
the oral Torah. And the oral Torah is based a lot on hermeneutics, on comparing words, on looking at very small details with hair-splitting details that you wouldn't even notice from a simple reading of the text, right? And that's very clear, especially if you go through, like now in the Daf Yomi, in the daily reading of one Talmud page a day, they're holding in Zvachim, which is the laws of animals, offerings, sacrifices, and you realize that they learn so many intricate laws from just like a juxtaposition of a word. You didn't even notice it, right? So it's hair splitting, and Moshe is like, I understand that I brought the Torah, but I didn't realize that you could take it to this extent. Now, the simple reading of it is just a cool story, but when you scrutinize what the story is saying, it's like the rabbis of the Talmud are saying, look, we know we basically created something that Moshe wouldn't have imagined. He's the foundation for it, but he wouldn't have imagined how far we can take it. And we can accept that because we understand that it's coming from a place of the involvement in the text, understanding that God is trying to communicate with us. And here's ways to engage with the text to try to understand what God wants to the smallest detail. We realize that that's going to take us into such far directions. Moshe couldn't have imagined it. He'll sit there. He's like, what are you guys even talking about? But it's coming from him at the end of the day. He invented the thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I might be botching up the story, but a scientist came to Queen Victoria and showed her that he invented the transistor, something like that. And she says, what good is a transistor? So he says, what good is a baby?
Mm-hmm.
This is the beginning of something. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
change the world. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how yet. I haven't played
So
that out
so
yet, but yeah.
so do Orthodox, like at the back of I think a lot of Orthodox Jews' minds, is this question of like, is any of this really true? And you have gone into like the academic world. Like you said, you have 2 MAs. You're actually a historian. So what would you say to them?
Um, it's complicated because what is it that you're asking? Is what true? Is the relationship with God true? Yes. Is the fact that God wants us to figure it out on our own true? Yes. Is this exactly how it should have looked? Maybe, right? There
I'm
is
asking for myself. I want to be a
yeah.
Jew. I
I
I
ask
want to be a
myself all the time, like, is this crazy? And I have these conversations with my friends, and at the end of the day, there needs to be an involvement in what is the Torah trying to say to me? What does God want from me? And to be more and more familiar. It's always a difficult thing to do. We outsource it. We ask a rabbi, we ask somebody because we're busy, and the time and the
Mhm.
skills. but to whatever extent we can in our lives to be aware that this is a story in development. It's a living Torah. It's
Okay,
not a
okay.
dogma.
Okay, so I have to say three things now in connection to this idea that it's a living Torah. First is that, like, for people who have a superficial relationship with Judaism, because I think to a certain extent that question of is any of this really true is ultimately rooted in a certain consciousness. That question arises out of a certain consciousness, and that
Mhm.
consciousness, I would say, you could say, is like outside the Torah looking in already. Because
Right.
when you're inside the Torah, when you're inside the living Torah, there's a way in which you experience reality as such that it's self-evident that the God of Israel created the world and
Yeah.
wants us to keep the Torah and mitzvot. But it's a
Yeah.
consciousness, in the same way, like someone who's in a sweat lodge in some Native American place gets into like a headspace, right? Where they're able to like see things from a certain perspective. It's like, that's the idea of la asok b'divrei Torah, that like you're
Yes.
mamish
Yes. You make it your
learning the
business.
Torah,
Yes.
like you're involving yourself in Torah. It's not like a book on a shelf. It's much more than that. It's a whole way of being in the world, which is why it's so important to say, well, there's the written Torah and there's the oral Torah, right? And that the
Right.
oral Torah is is more than a compendium. It's actually like reality in a sense. Like when we say Hashem looked into the world before he made the Torah, right? I think that that's a statement. I mean, that Hashem looked into the
We
Torah
looked at
before
it.
he made
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
world,
The Torah is
right?
the blueprint for the world. Yeah.
Right. So what does that mean? Does that mean he looked in the art scroll Chumash before he made the world? You know, it means that what Torah is itself is, it's black fire on white fire. It's a whole way of being in the universe. Um, and so then that question, is any of this true? It's sort of like addressed in that sense. Um, and And at the same time, if we don't go into that deeper level, many rabbis are going to be replaced by some sort of highly
A-
advanced chat GPT.
AI. Yeah. 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 And that danger has been there for a while because unfortunately, due to, I mean, many historic circumstances that have brought the Jewish people to the brink of destruction and then to a kind of a PTSD mode, perhaps, in which we are so anxious to preserve that we're afraid to create. Um, and that's, of course, a very oversimplified explanation of what the Jewish people have been through since the Holocaust. But in a sense, we have been stuck. And in a sense, there are now almost two different ways within the Orthodox community of looking at the world and how the Torah connects to it. And I'm not trying to create any division. I'm pointing out that there's just two different ways. And some of them are able to see, here we are, we're dealing with issues like the Temple Mount, with issues like the army, with issues like, internet. Um, how do you deal with those things? Or do we shelter away from them to preserve? Right. And when you deal with them, you realize Torah is a lot more alive and it's so engaged in reality, and it's so and it's a two-way stream. I mean, the world impacts the way we have to respond, and then we look to the Torah for how to respond. So you can't have you can't live in a vacuum, and in a sense, Torah has become just a text. You read a book to find an answer, as opposed to have a connection to the collective lived experience of Judaism, of Torah, of how rabbis have lived it, as opposed to just memorized bookshelves of it. Right? We've
Right. So in
lost
terms,
we've lost something.
right. So in terms of lived it, I'm all right. Listen, Nachliel, you're just gonna have to forgive me, but I have ADD and I have so many freaking questions popping through my head, and I'm trying to keep it tight. But just jumping back to this note of like how we live Judaism now. Um, well, we have 20 minutes left. Okay.
Up to you. I'm good. We
Okay.
can keep going.
Okay. Um, okay. Just like as a basic thing. 300 years ago, did Jews have separate milk and meat dishes, separate milk and meat ovens, separate milk and meat, everything like that,
That's that's a
like now?
great question. I always joke, there's a famous saying, that wife says to her husband, "Don't trafe up my kitchen with your Shulchan Aruch." You know? Um, the truth is that the laws of milk and meat have gone so far beyond the most stringent of stringencies. It's ridiculous. Like if you actually read the poskim who talk about dishwashers, theoretically you could even wash milk and meat in the same dishwasher at the same time. Today people have two separate dishwashers. You talk about steel pots and pans. There's no reason you have to have separate ones for fleshik and milchik, for meat and milk, except it's a stringency. So, and in fact, there are some rabbis who say in certain situations, even though we have all these sensitivities today, you can rely on these things and not make a big deal out of it. You haven't used it for meat in 24 hours, clean it, use it again. It doesn't absorb like a cast iron pot, which is intended to absorb, right? So these things were very different. People were definitely had a lot less luxury
They
to
didn't have
have
the
these kinds of
money. They
stringencies.
didn't have the space.
Right, right. Like you keep things clean. You know the 24
So
hours between
what
things.
did they do? What did they do? Like what I mean, like, like so like 300 years ago. So what is that? That's 18,
I mean, I'm
that's
I'm an
7.
ancient historian, so
Oh,
for this, I'm not an authority on this, but
okay.
just generally speaking, people would clean their dishes and done. Maybe there
Right.
are certain things. I mean, glass. I think the only thing you have to worry about is clay. You know,
Mhm.
Today
Mhm.
what do you have? Plastic, glass. I mean, 300 years ago we
Mhm.
didn't have plastic, but glass. I mean, glass is not a problem. It does,
Right.
and the
It's
fact
just
is
like
that
I just imagine like how did like in terms of our relationship with halacha, like or 1,000 years ago, or like
I mean,
so.
you have stories like this in the Talmud where somebody just like he took the knife, he stuck it in the dirt a few times and done, like overnight.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, I mean, it was a lot
Mhm.
simpler and people's resources were a lot. I mean, they didn't cover the entire kitchen in tinfoil for Pesach like we did in the desert, So
Right.
we, it's a lot of things have changed and not necessarily for the better. We have such a lifestyle that enables us to, in a sense, fulfill the mitzvah with such sensitivity that itself
Mhm.
can be a positive thing, but it can come at a
Mhm.
cost of forgetting what it's about and
See,
then freaking out over
I have
something.
to tell you, Nachliel, it's like when I first became Choser V'Tshuva, I really, really wanted to be a rabbi because I felt this calling to serve the Jewish people. And I saw
Mhm.
that the most important thing I could do with my life is help the Jewish people have a relationship with Hashem, because I saw what that did for me growing up in a postmodern context in which truth was just a relative, subjective
Right.
perspective. And then you fall into this pit of nihilism. And then what's the point of being alive if, nothing actually matters? And it was like, there's like, and I also grew up in an upper middle class, dysfunctional Jewish family. So like I had all the stuff and I saw that the stuff didn't fill the hole, and then it's like all of a sudden it's like, wow, like God exists. And like if you have a relationship with God, that's like the same power that overthrew Pharaoh,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
same source of creation. Like I can actually have a personal relationship with God. That's the most incredible thing in the world. And then the more and more I saw what rabbis did,
It's very disillusioning. Yes.
right, the more I was like, I don't know if I want to be a rabbi. Like,
Listen, I also, when I was 20, I thought I was going to start studying for the rabbinate, and I actually studied for 2 years. And I did enjoy the study, but then I realized, like, this is not what I want to do with my life. It's like, it's so,
mhm.
I mean, I'm sure there's places to be creative there, but I just felt that's not what I want to do. I'm just going to be stuck with the system and so many, you know, so I abandoned that.
So in terms of that system, so that's the question that I'm asking as my chavruta in this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Asking you as my chavruta. So like, so how do we as Jews who want to mamish do Hashem's will and like anchor ourselves in halacha,
Hmm.
reconcile that desire to do Hashem's will and anchor ourselves with halacha with what seems to be this like klipa
Yeah.
on top.
it's a difficult conversation because um, we have like the deeper you get into Orthodox Judaism, the more you take the authorities seriously. Like you have to take him seriously, and this is because part of the development, the application of Torah is through these authorities. So if you throw that away, then what are we doing? I'm just doing my own thing.
Right.
That's always a struggle. Like, but the rabbis say this, so how can I that? So that's always a challenge. To know enough to know when this is a stringency that I don't have to take upon myself. It's not good for me. It's not good for my spirituality. It's not good for my family. It's not good for my well-being. To know when not certain things you don't have to do that way. You know, you don't have to be that frum about certain things if it will hurt your relationship with God and with family. But it takes courage and it takes a willingness to learn and to know where are the boundaries, you know, and that's a difficult thing to do. There are today people to talk to about things like this because, you know, we have the internet. You could reach out to
Mm-hmm.
real people
Mm-hmm.
who talk about these things, but you then realize that a lot of the things we do are not necessary. You can have, like, even on the simplest level, you can have one sink in your house, you know, have one
Mm-hmm.
sink. You learn how to separate things, and if something goes wrong, and you know, like this touch, dairy this touched a non-dairy that, you don't have to freak out. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like on the simplest
Mm-hmm.
level, like okay, once you understand the basic rules, you know, I do some crunch time, read about it, read up for a few hours. Like okay, I got it. I don't need to be that stringent. I don't have to go that crazy. Um, you know, and other things like that. Some things are things that we do in our personal lives. Like like there's things that I've done in my personal life that I know. Um, I don't think the rabbis would necessarily agree with, but I saw that it's compromising my ability to function as a human being and to connect to
Mm-hmm.
God. And I'm like, okay, so I can't run after a minion every day. I can't do it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I just
Mm-hmm.
it's hurting me, right? I
Mm-hmm.
know that I need to. I know that I should. You know, I'm not saying here,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm not eating a bacon and
Mm-hmm.
cheese. You know, I'm saying
Right.
like, but
Right.
this is a great level to be at. I'm not there, and
I
one of
guess,
my
I guess what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to get at with you, because I know that like you're a historian, and I want to get into that more. But what I'm
Mhm.
trying to do is solve my own existential problem through talking to you, because I believe that you have an expertise, and a body of knowledge that I don't have access to, which is to hold two worlds at the same time. It's the
It's
from
yeah.
world, the Orthodox world, and then at the same time like the intellectually rigorous historical academic world, and to hold both of those.
It's my rabbi once told me you got to look at them like two parallel universes, which it doesn't always work. In some areas, it's a lifeline to think in those ways, but it is difficult because sometimes there's challenges that bleed over to the other side and say, wait a minute, but if this didn't historically happen, then why does this matter? Right? These questions come up and we have to engage with them. And then you
Sure.
realize there's a lot of people who engage with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when it first hits you, and I remember that experience when I went to Yeshiva University of all places. um, I went to Revel, the master's program in Jewish history, and you start just hearing the way people speak about our sages, about the Talmud, historically contextualizing them, comparing to other things, and it just suddenly makes your arms go numb.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like what, but how? What? So it does. There is a challenge there. I don't think it's a challenge we should avoid. I think it's a challenge we should engage with,
You're
but
right.
because when you get to the other side, you realize there is a way to live with both, to have the intellectual curiosity and the capacity to question things, and yet to look on the other side and see, but there's a wholesome picture here. There is a story that we are a part of, which is thousands of years old, and it's 100% has changed the world. And we are seeing
Mm-hmm.
that we're living in a time that is definitely in line with the way the prophets are describing these things. We are living in the messianic times. That's not a question.
Mm-hmm.
How, where, what, who, I don't know. But we're in those
Mm-hmm.
times, and we're seeing the impact of the
Mm-hmm.
world and the world's obsession with the people of Israel as we
Mm-hmm.
come back. And we're seeing the impact of the people, Israel on the world. It's like we're seeing amazing things happen, and you can't just throw that away because you have an intellectual question about you know, Rabbi Akiva and the Romans and I don't know, Stoic
Mm-hmm.
philosophy. You know,
Mhm.
like you could see like, okay, that has to be engaged with fully on its own terms. That's separate from what's happening here because there's a big picture. And I don't here's the thing. I think this goes back to what you asked about how literally should we read the creation story. It's
Mhm.
that people get caught up with mechanics. Like it says God did X, so you think of him sitting there like with hands and molding a human being out of clay. That's not
Mhm.
how God creates. We're stuck with the mechanics. It's like you say, uh, Trump built whatever hotel. No, he didn't. He never touched it, right? But it's mechanics.
Mhm.
We understand that that's
Mhm.
mechanics. Trump Tower. He didn't
Mhm.
build it. It's so God created humanity out of the earth. That
Mm.
I don't know. I don't care how long that took. By which processes it came about. It
Mhm.
can be billions of years of galactic
Mhm.
and planetary and biological evolution. Like that's great. If that's how God chose to do it, he knows what he's doing. I don't have to
Mhm.
be bogged down by mechanics. So there's a lot of mechanical looking at Judaism that once you realize that that's what we're doing, we're looking at it mechanically. You could either you throw the baby out with the bathwater, which does happen, or you say like, okay, let's
Mhm.
relax for a moment and try to see what it's saying. What is its meaning? How does it relate to
Mhm.
me? How does it relate to the
Can I
world?
tell you how I am already telling my kids this question? Because one day I'm afraid they're gonna come to me and be like, they're gonna be like, "Listen, the Torah is just as true as Spider-Man is true."
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Wait,
Like,
how,
they're
how
gonna
old are the kids so I get the
well,
reference?
5 and 3.
Okay, okay.
But they're already seeing, you see, the problem is in terms of stories, and we haven't even gotten into the culture wars, but, like, in terms of, like, stories, it's like, "Guess who's in my house? Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is in my house."
Oh
You
my
know?
wife hates Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, like,
She won't let Disney in the house.
all of these characters are in, they come in through friends. Someone gives, I if I wanna buy
Yeah,
an umbrella for my child, I can choose between a Batman umbrella and, some other, and these are memes. These are mimetic intellectual
right,
artifacts that have
right.
stories and cultures attached to them. Like, that's like, in terms of avodah zarah, like, you should not have idols in your house. It's like, you know, it's like I'm really fighting, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where part of me
Absolutely.
would like, yeah, I should just become Haredi. I should just circle the wagons and, like, but that's live in a vacuum, but that's not going to work either, and so then how am I going to deal with this? And again, like, I'm a seeker. So here is the best I've come to at this point. Um I say to my son, listen, there's facts, right? There's facts, like, actually, I say it, there's factual stories, which is like, it's sort of like, the sun is yellow, the grass is green, it's like things that you can see with objective reality. So it's like, I went to the store, you know, it's like nonfiction. It's like, right? Then there's play stories, right? Which is like
Hmm.
Pokemon, Batman, Spider-Man. It's like stories that are made up by people, right? That people made up in their imagination. And then there are Torah stories. And Torah stories are from Hashem.
Hmm.
They're not stories that were made up by people. There are stories that Hashem told us,
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to say it to kids.
right? They're stories
Yeah.
from Hashem. They're not stories from people. They weren't made up by some guy.
Hmm.
That's how I try to reconcile it.
Hmm.
Because then
I
there,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, no, that's for I think for 3, 5 years old, I think that's great. I mean, and the more they grow, like
sure,
we you here's the thing. If we do this right, if we really I'm going to go a little bit into my educational philosophy here. Some background. I went to Cheder. I went to Zilberman when I was in the old city. And for those who don't know, Zilberman is a system where from age 6, you're reading the Torah. You actually start with Vayikra, with Leviticus. You start learning about animals and sheep and offerings. And people think, what would kids care about that? I'm like, are you kidding me? Sheep and goats? We loved it. Right. So, and they read everything. They don't They don't avoid the uncomfortable things. They found ways to explain it genuinely to kids in a level that kids understand it. But you give them the whole thing. This is your Torah. I am its custodian for you. It's not my place to decide what is inappropriate for you to have. And when kids get all of it, you can have existential philosophers by the time they're in fifth grade. They have a sense of a breadth of what the Torah talks about, whether it's interpersonal relationships, it's family feuds, it's character flaws, it's what God wants of Abraham, it's what happens to the Jewish people, it's all of the good, the bad, and the ugly. You get it all. There's no sugarcoating everything. You know how to say it to a little kid, you know, but they figured it out. When you give them the whole thing, they have a much more robust ability to relate to the world and to God. You give them the whole thing. Because, like, oh, God said this. Here's the story. We're not like, oh, God was angry about, Aaron Onan, the whole story about masturbation and that. Like, we don't want first graders engaging in that, right? Because we're very Western. And so we do a disservice to our children because we are afraid of it. We don't give it to them as it is, as God intended. When you give them the whole thing, you find a way to say it. He didn't want to have, like, whatever. There's ways to say it to a 6-year-old, but he had the story, and then he can revisit it because there's also a spiritual connection. When he has all of it, it turns on certain things that you can't do the same way later in life. So that plays an important role. We need to give them the whole thing. And then they'll revisit it and they'll revisit it and they'll revisit it and they'll grow and they'll ask the questions, but they'll have the framework for what to ask the questions about. Because they can talk about what does God want from Abraham? What does he want from Yaakov? What does he want from what's happening here? So you start talking about God more and the role that he plays in our early history and how that reflects on us. I think that's a key thing for these conversations is to not just have them abstract. It's to get to the stories, you know?
But tell me more about your like I feel like I'm like I'm trying to to sniff your psyche for my questions, but I feel like I'm missing out on what you have to share with the world. Because I know that this is not your shtick, this is my shtick. So it's
I'm
like what
I'm I'm loving it.
yeah, you're like
Yeah, yeah.
what's like what it like all right, I'm just gonna ask you some questions that are on the top. Like, what do the Jewish people need to know, according to you?
Wow. Well, first of all, to know the Torah, right? We need to know the Torah. We need to know the Tanakh, even the boring stuff. You got to know it. You got to know everything. You got to know about the animals and the offerings and all this stuff. That's core. After that, I mean, learning history is key. We do need to know history. Uh, Understanding oral law is a difficult one if you just read it raw, like reading Midrashim, reading Mishnah, reading Gemara. Those things are less accessible than the Torah, but there's so many opportunities out there, for English translations and illustrated, animated. I mean, you could find a way, but to make it part of our lives, to be in conversation with the Torah, even if you're like, I hate this. What is this about? This is horrible. What? Fine, but be in conversation with it and broaden your horizons. Just to know our texts and our sources, I think goes a long way. Some things are not for everyone. I don't think Talmud is for everyone. Talmud, requires a certain kind of mindset stepping into it, and to get into it requires dedication. I think it's important. It's important. I don't know how I would prioritize it for somebody who's just beginning, but it is important to be in conversation with the people who have formed the way we look at Judaism today. That happens in the Talmud, without a question. So it's not for everyone, like in the sense of, let's just say, Daf Yomi, or like, but to be in conversation with it, to be aware of it, to know what the struggles are, the key conversations, the arguments, the fact that we care about the smallest detail and how to manifest God's will in the smallest details of our lives is what made the difference between a Jewish people who build up the world and a fanatical religion that's trying to destroy the world to submit to God. It's
Mm-hmm.
in the details. God is in the
Mm-hmm.
details. The Jewish approach is about details. So it looks silly at first, but when you realize that those details, the involvement in those details, is what made the world a better place through the Jewish people, through the Torah, I think that that itself merits engaging in these sources, even if they seem like benign. Why would I care about the laws of, I don't know, tax law that comes from Sasanian Babylon, right? But still, like, yeah, I think that's, I'm going on just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
So I think definitely engaging in that. Definitely Jewish history is key. Where to start in Jewish history is difficult. I'd say pick one period and try to do a deep dive, but also try to expand horizons. There's just so much there. Like, I don't know medieval Jewish history that well. I do
Okay.
ancient Jewish history, but
Okay. I'm
every
gonna.
once in a while I'll do a deep dive into a different area.
So from your ancient, wearing your ancient Jewish history hat, and at the same time your Nachliel living in Israel 2025 hat, imagine like Hashem just struck you with a lightning bolt of prophecy and nevuah right now, right? Like what do the Jewish people need to know? What do we need to know, Nachliel?
That's a tough one. I could say something romantic, like we need to know it was worth it. You know,
I just
uh,
your truth. What's your
yeah,
truth?
yeah.
What's
What we're going through is worth it. It's real, and it's gonna work itself out for the better of the world. And we should never give up. We're doing great things.
can you expound on that? As in, listen, I see you as a visionary, so I'm trying to get to the vision.
I wish I did.
I see you as a
uh,
visionary.
um,
I think
wow,
you
let's
have vision,
unpack
man.
this. Yeah. Um,
Why do you say
how
what you're
how about
saying?
now? No.
There
So,
you go.
well,
Should we take
first of
off our
all,
glasses? Should we take off our glasses?
then it's more direct.
Yeah.
Um, we have we're very fortunate to live in the times we live. I mean, on the one side, it's never been easier to access Jewish information and to live in the land of Israel. I don't think that there's any period in Jewish history that compares to the success in which we are living on our land today, by far. In terms of the sheer number of people, the institutions we've built, the developments that are benefiting humanity. That's not a question. On the other hand, there's the ugly side of the neighborhood that we don't look at. There's a lot of issues that we have internally, externally, moral, philosophical questions about how do we deal, for example, with everything from our Muslim neighbors to world opinion to parts of Jerusalem that are undeveloped to everything from, spousal abuse and assimilation and drugs. There's so many things that are plaguing our people. And then you get into not even getting into politics. I stay away from politics, but like we almost tore ourselves apart before this war because of the judicial reform. There are real deep issues that we have to solve. And I would hope that a prophet would have something to say about them, though even back in the day, Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu, they were beaten up for speaking the truth. So it's not a good occupation to be a prophet.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nonprofit organization, as we say, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I would hope that a message like that would encourage us to find the strength to keep on going and fighting the fight and somehow opening the eyes of, let's just say, the people who don't see things this way, to be able to realize that we're part of something so beautiful and so great. They don't want to fight it, you know?
It's like
Um,
what's coming to me is like we're being crushed in the darkness, but like we're being crushed like an olive that's gonna have like an oil that's gonna shine a light.
that is a beautiful metaphor. That is a beautiful metaphor. I like that.
Like that's kind
Yeah.
of how it feels internally right now when I think about being a Jew on an individual and collective level. I kind of feel like I'm being crushed.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause the particular way in which we're being crushed is supposed to bring out the better in us
Yeah.
on a personal, an individual level, and a national level.
Like, it's
And
just
that's
crazy when I see what's going on in the news. Like, I grew up in America, and it's just like what's happening in America right now is crazy on many levels, but at this point, I'm just talking about the anti-Semitism.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves when we combat anti-Semitism the way it's been dealt with by trying to just expose it and show it. And we think that if we prove sufficiently without a shadow of a doubt that without getting into names, this podcast or that person, this personality is actually anti-Semitic, that will solve the problem because now people will call it out. And I think that's a mistake. Uh, I come from the assumption that it's there already. It's not just anti-Semitism. There's a deep fear and hatred of what the message of Israel is. We're here as we're here to say that the world has meaning, purpose, and direction, and there's a story, and people are afraid of that. Like they're deeply afraid of that. They it's like they won't. What was that saying? Jews will not replace us. It's like the
Mhm.
fear that we have of AI, of Skynet, of something that looks like
Mhm.
us but is not
Mhm.
us, and we don't appreciate the power of our message um, sufficiently that we think if we just here's the thing: if we try to combat anti-Semitism, we're basically saying we're just like everybody else. Stop hating us, but we're not just like everybody else. Like we're different. So come to terms with that. Brace that. Like
Mhm.
own it.
Mhm.
So what is our message? And that's
Mhm.
we're missing out on that because we're focused too much on trying to please the world by showing that it's not okay to, on the one hand, criticize bigots and this phobia and that phobia, but to be an anti-Semite. It's like
Mhm.
that, but we're not like everybody else. I understand why they hate us. Let's be better at what we do so that we can shine.
So what is our
We don't try, we don't want to take
message?
over the world.
What
Like
is our message, Nachiel?
when we look at the world as something that's evolving and interconnected and going towards something which involves consciousness, awareness, knowledge, light. I mean, how that's going to work out is, you could leave that to Isaac Asimov. I don't care how many planets we colonize. The bottom line is we will be a human species that is connected to God, that brings light to the world and brings it all together. It's not just a lot of meaningless things that are happening. We are part of the world. We are this. Put it like this: the fact that Adam is called Adam from the earth is because we are the consciousness, the mouthpiece of the earth. We are the earth, and we need to remember that, and we
Can you
need to
break that
see
down
it.
of Adam, Adama? Can you just break that down for
Yeah, the reason humans are called human is because of the word humus, not humus, of earth. We are of the earth.
and in
Humanity is
Hebrew,
in Hebrew,
Adam.
Adama means earth. So man made God dirt from the earth. I'm probably misquoting the English, but I
Mhm.
don't I speak
Mhm.
Hebrew. When I
Mhm.
read the Torah, it's
The
Hebrew.
dust of the earth, the dirt of the earth.
Dirt of the earth. We are Adam, and the reason we're called Adam is because we come from Adama. We come from the earth. We are Mr. Earth, and we need to remember that. We've lost touch with that, with technology, with industrialization, with cities. We've lost touch with that, and in a sense that people laugh at the idea of a temple think now, the temple is built and we're coming in 2025 and I'm a Kohen and I am a Kohen and I'm bringing offerings and animals. They're like the barbarity that they're so uncultured, and you think, but we've lost touch with our humanity. The connection to the animal kingdom and to the earth is should be at the core of our message to the world, and that's how we do it. We do it through a temple to God, which elevates all of the elements of this world. It's not just humanity reaching space; it's humanity being human. That's our message:
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
fully human, to be
And
fully
and and and
aware.
in your and Mhm. Yeah, and in your vision, like, what does it mean when you say the Jewish people are shining? Like, instead of trying to, like, expose anti-Semitism, what we as Jews need to do is shine. Like, in your vision, in your imagination, what does that look like? Tell me a story.
Wow. Well, in my personal life, this is what I do. The way we speak, we're kind of having a behind the scenes. What does Nachiel think about? I usually
Mhm.
don't have an opportunity to share these things. Definitely not on a public platform. But I'm usually bringing this charge with me when I am engaging in a museum. And people connect to that. They see that. I bring this, we are part of this ongoing story, not just because we are descendants of people who lived in those periods, but this is part of our story. And it's part of the story of the world. And it matters. And we are the message to the world is that all of this history comes together and means something,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
I just find the museum is such an amazing place to do that because it's detached from the classroom.
Mhm.
I could tell you
Okay, so
stories
let's
about,
so
you
let's
know,
drop
that,
in,
you know.
dude. Let's go out from the let's stop being behind the scenes and go into the front of the scenes. Like, what's
Sure.
tell me these museum stories. Tell me about, like, your mission as a museum educator.
So I'll tell it to you through a story when I realized the power of of these museums tours. I think it was 2017, maybe 2018. Yeah, 2018. Where I had about 30 people, 35 people on a tour at the Met in the Egyptian galleries. This was a Pesach tour. So we're doing Egypt, the Exodus, the Pharaoh. We're talking about freedom. We're talking about the land of Israel versus Egypt, the dependency on the Nile and slave mentality versus rain and God's care for the land of Israel through rain, which corresponds to our moral status. As we read it in the Shema, if you do so and so, I will provide rain in its time. And we realize that that's freedom mentality. So I'm having these deep philosophical conversations in a museum. And the people who are on my tour were everything from secular and religious. I had the Rosh Yeshiva of the Gush, Rav Gigi and Rav Bazak. I had a Reformed female rabbi. There was an 86-year-old woman and a 6-year-old kid. And we're all in the same space talking deep Torah. Where else could you do that? And I realized, wow, like this is amazing. We're like I'm touching people who couldn't be touched in other places. And this happens again and again. I mean, I've worked with all kinds of organizations, you know, multi-billionaires who are donors for big Jewish organizations on tour. And the person, I'm keeping their name private, but after one of these tours, we did a Hanukkah tour of the Met, talking about Hellenism and Judaism, a cultural clash, Athens and Jerusalem, the underpinnings of the Western world. And we're doing this in the Greek galleries. And we're talking, and the rabbi who organized this group told me, you understand that some of these people you could not fit in the same room. They are so politically divided. And here in the museum, you have like a physicist, a big banker, a kiruv rabbi, and we're just talking. We're being real. We're talking about the message of the Jewish people in a museum. That's an amazing thing to be able to do, and it inspires me to keep doing it.
Mhm. Mhm. So tell me your origin story. Like, how did, like, I know you mentioned it briefly that, like, you just realized it would be better to do it in a museum, but, like, give me now that we've gone deep, give me the origin story again. Like we're hitting
Wow.
reset on the Nintendo. Like,
Well, there's so many dots along the way. I never know which are the
so
necessarily the
start when you
ones I
were
want to
when you
focus
were a
on.
little boy.
I mean, I was born in Jerusalem. My parents lived in Katamontet until 1987. Then we moved to the old city. Katamontet is now being completely redone, new buildings, new projects, gentrified. But Katamontet, not Katamon. Katamon is like, for those like to bring an example from the United States. Katamon is like the five towns. Katamonim is the Bronx. Okay. So Katamonim is the slums. I mean, one of the reasons my parents left is because of the mafia. I mean, people are getting mugged on the streets. It's a terrible place to live. It's near the mall today, near the Mall Hamal in Jerusalem. So we moved to the old city. My father was working at yeshiva at Ateret Kohanim. which he was working as a guide. But Ateret Kohanim, what they do is they find homes that were originally owned by Jews until the 1929 pogroms. Jews had to flee. Arabs are now sitting there. They find the legal stuff. They do the footwork, and they buy the houses back. And it's a very tricky operation because they won't let you sell a house to a Jew. So it's a complicated thing. But my father worked for them for 7 years, and that brought us to the old city so that my father can actually see the kids. Right. So I grew up there, and my father also became a tour guide. It started with people asking for directions to the Kotel, and then my father say, "You can go that way to the Kotel, but did you know that this is Hezekiah's wall and there's other things to see?" So way back, he wrote what's called Tzaddik's Guide to the Old City. It's very outdated. I mean, even the phone numbers have an extra digit now. But still, this is a thing. I remember Tzaddik's Deli way back in the day. So I grew up with this connection to through guiding archaeology, Torah, history in the old city for years. And you see tourism and tourists come into your house, and like that was the environment. Even though it was very much a bubble, like I didn't know anything about the Christian quarter and the Muslim quarter except walking through and knowing through a few shops. It's a whole world there that I was completely oblivious to. But I grew up in the old city. And then I actually went to special ed from age 9 through my bar mitzvah, which was a secular. And before I went to the special ed, back then people didn't know exactly what ADHD was. So my parents didn't quite know what to do with me. And they sent me to special ed school, B'nai B'rith organization. And before I went, they consulted with my father's rabbi from Ner Yisrael, Rav Yaakov Weinberg, and they asked him, should I go to this special ed school, which it's been around for decades. It has a track record. It's solid. It's stable. It's secular. Or should we send Nachliel to a religious special ed school that just opened up? And he said two things. He said, number one, the most important thing is stability. He should go to the secular place. Number two, he gave me a blessing. And his blessing was that I should always be the influencer and not the one influenced by others. And that stuck with me. And so I went for 5 years of my life, almost 5 years. I was in special ed. I was the only religious kid. I had my long payas. I once got into a fight. A friend ripped one of them off. I mean, I was the kid who was made fun of, Dossi, as they say in Israel. But that was it. That was my experience. And then I went to middle school, high school. I went to a high school called Dvir, which means it's another word for the Holy of Holies. It was founded by the Temple Institute. And I went there because they have art and music. So I went into art school in a yeshiva. It was great. I also did some music, some piano, some choir, but I went along that path. The entire time I'm also doing martial arts. I started in 7th grade doing ninjutsu, jujitsu, kung fu, eventually capoeira, the Brazilian stuff with the music and the acrobatics. I'm still doing that and teaching it. And sort of there's always been this output of creativity, education, music, art, informal education, which was always been there. Uh, at a certain point, after high school, I tried to get into the army. I couldn't get into the army. It's a long story, but it has a lot to do with my evaluation when I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
Some stupidity, but I couldn't get into the army. So I said, like, okay, what am I supposed to do with myself? So I went to yeshiva for 6 years. Yeshiva in Telstone, an Israeli place. I wouldn't say that their worldview necessarily impacted me in any significant way, but I did spend 6 years there. I painted, I taught capoeira, I did my thing. And then I felt I was plateauing. I need to do something with my life. And I ended up going to college. So in 2009, I started college. I went to Teachers College in Jerusalem. It's called Lifshitz. It's now been absorbed by Herzog. So Lifshitz doesn't really exist as an independent institution anymore, but it's on Hillel Street. So I studied for a teacher's degree and a double major in Tanakh, biblical studies, and mass media. And I started teaching in schools as a student, and I fell in love with schools. I'm like, wow, I love this. I had my breakdown moments where like I suddenly discovered, adolescence. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing in school? But there's cynicism and this and that. But I got through that. And when I finished my college degree in 2013, I realized that the Israeli education system is not where I want to work. I felt constrained, restricted, choked, underpaid, overworked, and with no support. And perhaps that would have been different if I would have found different schools, but I've been through quite a few and consulted with people, and I just didn't know what to do next. And then a conversation came kind of out of nowhere. Um, my father's rabbi suggested I have a conversation with Rabbi Joey Dweck, who uh, who is for several years the principal of Barkai Yeshiva in Brooklyn. It's a Syrian yeshiva. The Barkai system is basically a variation of Zilberman, where I grew up. In other words, we read all the text, unfiltered, read it as it is, give it to the children, and just do it in an age-appropriate way. Give them the whole thing, adapted to the Syrian culture in Brooklyn. So, and they teach in Hebrew. So philosophically, it worked for me to work teaching that school. Like we know people, we're part of the same worldview. So I never thought I would have left the country, but I said, you know what? I'm going to go to Brooklyn. I'll work in Barkai for 3-4 years.
You're
I'll get
married, not
grounded
married?
enough. What's that? I wasn't
Married, not
married yet.
married?
No, single. I got married when I came back to Israel.
Okay.
I
And
got
I
married.
started following you when you were still in America, right? So this is like we're
Probably
getting
when I was transitioning, because I came back during COVID.
okay.
I came back during COVID. Like that was the breaking point. I was planning on coming back anyway. I extended my 3-4 years to almost 7. So Barkai ended up not working out for me. It wasn't the right school for me, but also Rabbi Joey Dweck moved to become the senior rabbi at the Spanish Portuguese Bevis Marks in London. And I really felt that he was the reason I was there, his mentorship. I mean, it was incredible how I grew there. But I realized after he left, the school was going to be kind of chaotic, reinventing itself, which is true. So it was a good move. I tried figuring out other things. I found out about Montessori. I moved to New Jersey and I worked in a Montessori school as a middle school teacher. So I took the basic training. I really fell in love with that way of teaching because I'm so ADHD. When I was teaching at Barkai, I was on Ritalin, right? And I'm like, wow, I could stop taking Ritalin. I could just be in these big classrooms and do creative stuff. And those were 2 very, very good years for me as I developed. And as I mentioned, in my second year there, I I stumbled upon museum tours. So it wasn't even something I thought about. It's like something.
Okay, but retell that story again. Retell the story. How did you stumble on it?
So first of all, there's the fact that my father said to me, listen, when I moved to the States in the summer of 2013, like for the 2013-14 school year, he said to me, you're going to be in New York. You should go to the Met. There's a lot to do there. Get familiar, go on Sundays, and at a certain point, you could start guiding people and educators. And needless to say, I didn't listen at all. I did not go a single time. The one exception is when there was a certain exhibit, my father said, you got to go, you got to go, you got to go. I went on the closing day of the exhibit. I ran through. I had no idea what was going on. I saw a few artifacts from the Israel Museum. I didn't know they're from the Israel Museum. I saw the Tel Dan stela that mentions the House of David. Somebody bumped into me and asked me, do you read Aramaic? I'm like, yeah, which apparently I did. So he took me to the Tel Dan stela, which is written in ancient Hebrew Aramaic, and I read it. And I'm like, this is Hebrew. I didn't even know it was Aramaic because I was just clueless,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that started something. Then when we were planning a field, like a trip, it was going to be half a day in the Tenement Museum and half a day in the Met. But the teacher who was doing the Tenement Museum was sick. They couldn't do that. It ended up being an entire day at the Met. And so I planned a tour. So I went a couple of times. And one of the times that I went to the Met um, was in November. And my father usually goes to the States in November. He's actually there now, but it's already December. He usually goes in November. There's this annual convention. It's called the ASOR convention. It's the International Archaeology Convention. So he always goes. And then he came to visit me. So we went together to the museum. My father said to me, you need to go to this exhibit about the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. That meant nothing to me. What does that even mean, Middle Kingdom of Egypt? Fine. I went to the Met. Lots of pharaohs, funky hats, cool, big, impressive, but I didn't connect. I didn't understand what I'm doing there. And then I went with my father, and he pointed out a few things, and he said, you see the date here? This is from the time of Joshua, and this is from the time of Abraham. And at a certain point, something clicked. And I'm like, so when I look at this, how does this fit in a Jewish context? I can relate to it. That was the beginning. And so I prepared this tour. Now, the tour itself on a didactic level was a disaster. I was basically lecturing inside a museum with a lot of hormonal seventh, eighth graders. It was not easy. It was not easy. We had fun, but it was not easy. But it was the first time I ever did a tour. I didn't think about it again. It was a one-off. Now, I still hadn't, me and my ADHD, you can probably relate, I had an outstanding paper, which was the one thing waiting to complete my degree. It's been
Mm.
outstanding for 3 years. So I come to Israel in my summer, my usual visit, and I meet up with my department head of communications. We're talking about my paper. How you doing? What's going on in the States? I'm like, listen, I don't know if I'm going to be staying in the education system for long. Maybe I'll start a YouTube channel. I was inspired by Alpha M, if you know him, Aaron Marino.
Hmm.
So I'm like, I'm going to be a YouTuber. I'm going to show teachers how to create engaging materials about history, archaeology. I'm going to do it through YouTube. That's just what I thought I was going to do. So that year in Israel, 2016, I think it was 2016, I was overbooked the entire summer. I was in Israel. I went to archaeological digs. I did interviews. I went to conventions. I met up with people. I went to this educational headquarters, that education. Like, I wasn't even thinking about museums, just like something different in Jewish education. I had no idea what the heck I was going to do with it. And so I meet up with my professor, and he's the
You were
communications.
listening to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I was starting something. I was going to call the channel Torah Intermedia, teaching Torah through different types of media.
Mm.
And it was a very bizarre name, but that's what my business was called for a few years. I opened an LLC with that name, and I meet with my professor, Suriel Rashi, and he says to me, you know, I'm all for communications, YouTube, and all that stuff. I don't see how you're going to monetize that and really live off that right now. But that museum tour that you did, that is something. You're not talking about somewhere in the Midwest. You're in New York City. If you could captivate New Yorkers' kids' attention for 90 minutes in a museum, you've got something. I would dig deeper instead of coming back to Israel now. I'm all for you coming back to Israel, but I think you've got something. You're sitting on a gold mine and deciding to basically be a slave in another country instead of digging deep. So I listened to him and I'm like, he's got a point. So I spoke to my father. He made some phone calls with different schools in Brooklyn. I spoke to a few people who I know, very friendly with in the educational world. And when I came back to the States, they said, show me what you can do. So, long story short, I had some meetings. I was able to get some interviews with schools. I was able to land one gig that entire year. That was 2017. I did one tour for Magen David Yeshiva High School, ninth grade girls, 46 girls in the Met. We had to split the group into two, work with the other teacher. A lot of things did not work, but it was a one-time thing. And a lot of the other schools said, listen, it's a little bit too late. We don't know what this is yet. Maybe next year or whatever. So I was still in New Jersey. And at this time, the other school was Yeshiva Flatbush. Scheduling didn't work. We never met. Didn't happen. Fine. So to prepare this tour, I said I have to come into the classroom a couple of times. I was living in New Jersey. I drove into Brooklyn. I taught the ninth grade girls. We did some stuff in the classroom, and then we did the tour. And then the school said, well, would you like to teach history here? And their position was a part-time position, which involved coming in once on a Tuesday or some other day and once on a Friday for a 35-minute class. And I have to go through the Verrazano each way. So that means it's, in terms of the tariffs and the traffic and the timing and it just was not worth it. I said no. I kept on doing my thing. I made a lot of phone calls. There's a personal story, but it should be encouraging. I went through a very difficult breakup that year. And after that, I'm like, if I can go through this, I could do cold calls to school. And I think I called 13 schools that day. I got a lot of no's, a lot of maybes, a lot of let's try last year. And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing this. I basically moved to a part-time job. We're teaching at a Hebrew school so that I could devote more of my time to developing this and not be, shackled to a paycheck. Part-time job, live in somebody's basement, and I started doing this. I went to the museum. I met up, went to the museum again and again and again. I call people. I try to do stuff. And that summer, I said, I'm not going to Israel. I'm staying here. As much as it pains me, I want to see my family. I haven't been there in a year. I'm staying here. And I worked like a dog that entire
Because
summer.
summer is when they're planning next year.
Right. I called Kushner Academy. Their teachers came on my tour. I work with Hadar Institute. I work with this. I work with Tanakh Study. I just worked with, and I did public tours, and it just started becoming a thing. Like there's this guy who's doing Tanakh tours of the Met. So after that, I picked up the phone and I spoke to Mag and David. I said, hey, I'm moving to Brooklyn. I need to be near the city. Do you have a job for me? They said, yes. How many classes can you take? I said, two. Would you do three? Fine. That's it. They wanted to give me more. I said, no, this needs to be a part-time job. My priority is to give time to developing my tours of the Met.
So tell me, how did your relationship to the museum change during this whole time?
Well, at first it was a big intimidating place where there's a lot of artifacts that you could basically line up with a verse and give a lecture about. It took a few years, but I remember two um, very significant conversations that I had with clients on my tour that changed the way I look at a museum. The first one was with Rabbi David Foreman of Aleph Beta. So he brought his whole team on my tour. We did my very first Hanukkah tour, and I was basically giving a history lecture in the museum. And he guided me at a few points, and he showed me, like, asked me questions about the artifact we're looking at to draw people's attention to it. And then afterwards, he said to me, listen, I work in video education, and I can tell you, you don't owe it to your crowd to give them the entire history in the museum. You can make a video about it. You can make a recording about it. You can send it to them. You don't have to do it that way. What I want to hear is your story. How do you relate to this? What do you see here? Take me into your world. And I'm like, wow, like I didn't think about it that way. I don't have to do history. I have to do what do I see or what speaks to me. And so at the time, this is already Hanukkah. First of all, I changed the way I did my tours ever since. Like that was a watershed moment. I was planning my Pesach tour. And at first I was thinking, how do I line up different Egyptian periods with the Jewish Exodus story? And I have the largest Egyptian collection in the world after Cairo. And I'm thinking about two rooms in the museum. This is not the right way to think about it. So Rabbi David Foreman's insight told me, think creatively. What is the experience of going through an Egyptian gallery? What does it feel like to feel so, like when you stand in front of this massive statue of a pharaoh? How would you feel there if you were in Egypt? What does it mean to be a slave in Egypt? What are the like? And I started exploring that, and so that was a watershed moment. And since then, I really changed the way I look at museums as a space to tell a story, to connect, to relate, to be inspired. The second story was a client who I'm very friendly with. He was an older person, and he had a day off. He came to my tour of the Met, and halfway through the tour, he had this look on his face like he was suffocating, like he needed to get out of there. He shook my hand. He courteously said, "Thank you so much. I got to go," and he left. Now, I realized I did something wrong. I didn't know what it was. At the time, I was walking around with an iPad, showing pictures of stuff, explaining things, whatever, doing my thing. I bump into him. I'm sitting at the Upper West Side, and I see him walk by. So I call him. His name is Shlomo. I say, like, Shlomo, I want to talk to you. It's like, hey, how you doing? Whatever. It's like, listen, I have to understand something. Why did you walk out of my tour? I said, listen, you're my friend. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I said, give it to me. I want to know. No, nobody's ever done that. I need to know. So he said to me, look, I work in a desk office. I look at a computer all day. I go to the museum to get away from screens. And here you are sticking a screen back into my face. Like, that's not why I come to the museum. And he said, listen, I go to docent-led tours all the time. The docents, they show you the painting, they take you into it, they make you notice details. Take me into the artifact that's in front of you. Don't flash a screen with an artifact in another museum. So, like, you're right. And that was also something that I changed, completely changed, um, to look more at what we're looking at. And also as an artist, I mean, I paint. I'm currently not working as an artist, but I went to art school. Like I know how to look at a painting. Um, and so do more of that. Be more engaging. Notice the tiny little artifact that you didn't even pay attention to. Then tell a story about it. How does it relate to something else? Let's go on a journey. And those are two moments that really helped me change the way I do tours. And of course, I'm constantly growing and learning. I mean, I'm very confident now because I've done thousands of hours in the museum. right? But those are I would say the underpinnings of how I look at the
Mm-hmm.
museum.
By the way, on that note, is there any tours coming up that people can be a part of?
Excuse me. Um, so I have my Hanukkah tour in the Israel Museum, which next week, already Monday, and I'm going to be posting some more dates very soon. I'm posting them on my website, themuseumguy.coil. So I do about 2-hour tours for adults. For families, I do it about 90 minutes and have different rates, different days. But basically, this is a Hanukkah tour. But it's not a history tour of Hanukkah. It's an experience about Hellenism, Judaism, our message to the world, the encounter with the West. And we can do this through paintings, through archaeology, through coins. So there's a lot of ways to do it.
Very cool. And and in terms of like how would you explain now that you've shared your origin story, like walk me through, obviously, like I have to do it to experience, but like walk me through like a museum guy's tour experience. Like what can I expect? What would happen?
So first of all, um, we begin a tour in the museum lobby just for logistical reasons, so that everybody gets in, and I pick up the tickets for everybody, and it's a whole thing. But we walk through the museum, and at different points, I try to give you. There's a saying: tell them what you're going to tell them, say it to them, and then tell them what you told them. Right. So I want people to know what to expect, and then also mid summaries, and in the end, here's what we've learned. And I like to take people to move around a lot. I don't like to stand in place too long, like people often do. They just open up their chairs and they sit around for a gallery talk. I try to avoid staying in place for too long. First of all, me and my ADHD, like I need to move. I need to see things. But also, I want people to cover ground and to realize that the museum isn't just archaeology. You could tell the Jewish story even through depictions of the Jewish story through Christian paintings and furniture that inspired our story, inspired them. Let's look at it now from a Jewish angle. You know, we could look at so many different things. I mean, the Israel Museum has it's a massive museum. I mean, it has the Shrine of the Book, it has the Second Temple model, the Statue Garden, lots of ongoing temporary exhibits. Some of them I can relate to and connect to. I mean, they're constantly changing. And then the archaeology, the Judaica, and the art and the Israeli art. With all of that, there's just so much to do that it's endless. So I'm constantly
So
coming up
tell
with
me,
new themes.
tell me why I should come to a museum with you. Why should I care about a museum?
That's the story. It's really about telling a story. A museum can be boring without the connection to it. When you have a good story, the museum is an amazing place to tell the story. The museum has things you could only see in a museum alongside each other that can inspire you, that you can connect to, and that are ancient and that are modern and that made a difference to our history. I mean, it's one thing to sit in the classroom and read about Chizkiyahu, about King Hezekiah. It's quite another thing to see his mention on a cylinder by Sancherib from 2,700 years ago, talking about him, and seeing the Assyrian warfare and understanding who are the Assyrians and seeing how he wrote his name on a seal and stamped things and how that ties into the dynamics of the geopolitics of the time. That's something that the museum is the best place to do it. You could walk through it and just listen with your audio guide, but you'll miss the passion, the excitement, the fire, the magic, the story, right? I'm there to tell a story, and the museum is my background. It's my playing ground. It's my playing field.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the
Mhm.
museum will come alive.
Mhm.
I've heard the feedback from enough people who were very cynical or skeptical about museums, or people who were lifelong museum goers who never saw the museum like that or never went to that area of the museum. I've heard it so
Mhm.
many times, I'm confident.
Yeah, it's like museums are kind of like my experience of museum is generally boredom,
Hmm.
with an awareness that there's something really deep that I'm missing out on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I bring the museum to life. No.
That's
And
amazing.
part of that's the mustache and the bow ties. I mean, you got
Mhm.
to look like you're. I used to wear suits in the museum, and I
Mhm.
felt that's way too formal. Like the museum
Mhm.
already has so much stacked
Wait,
up
you're
against
telling
it.
me that this mustache is just so that people will listen to you in the museum? Come on, man.
Let's just say that it helps. That's not
Okay.
why it's there, but it
All
definitely
right.
helps. People have told me you're the museum, but I started wearing suspenders and bow ties. in the
Mm-hmm.
museum to lighten it
Mm-hmm.
up and to have fun. When people see that you're having fun in the museum, it is contagious.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's like it's fascinating. It's just filled with treasures.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I mean, sometimes uh, there are challenges. I mean, it's not like every museum
Mm-hmm.
tour is easy. You can work with a difficult crowd. You can be with a school where there's suddenly teachers who have to deal with discipline and it kills the mood. And there's all kinds of different situations. It's not always perfect. You know, not every museum tour.
Mm-hmm.
There's some tours that I come out of, I'm like, that was draining emotionally. Like, wow, I feel like they missed the point. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it happens all the
Mm-hmm.
time. You know, some people
How
I
mu
wasn't able to reach.
how are we doing on time, by the way?
Oh wow. I do have to start wrapping up. I do have a meeting coming up.
Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna pivot for a second.
Hmm.
Um, just in terms of Aleph male, it's not about the DOG, it's about the God. Like on one foot, uh, what does it mean to be a Jewish man? What does it mean to you to be a Jewish man?
To be proud of who I am, to be confident in who I am and my story as part of the story, not only of the Jewish people, of Am Yisrael, really, which is a broader idea than Jewish, it's Israel, but also as part of the story of the world, to realize that we are blessed to have that mission, that privilege to be part of the story, because not everybody is. Everybody should be impacted by it. If we are in that position, we have to lead. We have speak to speak about it. We have to be vocal about who we are, not to be ashamed of our mission. And of course, to be responsible for our families and to raise them in this way, to take care of them, you know, all that's
Mm-hmm.
involved in that. That's
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
But
I
you're saying
work, yeah.
there's a bigger context, and that bigger context of what it means to be a Jewish man is to be proud of the fact that we are part of Israel and Am Yisrael.
We are part Israel. Think of Israel as an enterprise, like the Enterprise in Star Trek. I'm not much of a Trekkie, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a good mushal. When you say Shema in the morning, you're logging on. Star date, whatever it is, we're on mission. We are moving forward. This galactic mission of humanity. It's happening. We are moving forward. You clock out at night. You say Shema again. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We are part of a mission to bring universal awareness and consciousness. That's no small thing to be able to be part of that and to live in a time where it's coming together. That's something to be proud of, to carry with honor, and to bring to your family and raise your family like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
To be proud of that.
And how many years have you been a father now?
Um, three, almost three
Okay, so
years.
your oldest is 3.
My oldest is 2.5. Yeah, almost
Okay.
three.
So
Almost three.
so 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 what have you learned in the past 2.5 years? What do fathers who still have a baby in the oven and it's their first one, what do they need to know?
You got to roll with the punches. I mean, you never know. It's going to change your life um, for the better. And it's a lot of struggle to adjust to. It's your time is no longer 100% yours. You read all these motivational books like the 5 a.m. Club, and then suddenly you realize, like, yeah, but it doesn't work when you have toddlers. It just doesn't work. Like
I feel like
I was
so
up
many of
since
those
six.
motivational books are for single people.
Exactly. Like, or the people say, like, you need 8 hours of sleep a night. Like, I have a half-year old. My daughter's half a year old. She still wakes up in the middle of the night, and I'm
Mhm.
the one who wakes up from it.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
like, it's very difficult to be productive at the most productive hours of the day when you have kids. And of course, not to neglect your marriage and to work on the relationship and have dates with your wife and not just run into this, run of the
Mhm.
mill being roommates. These things take avoda, they take work, they take active
Mhm.
work and participation. And that's something you got to brace yourself for. You got to know that it's going to happen, and it's going to make you a better person.
And what what is the story of beards in the Jewish people?
Oof, wow. Wow. I mean, Kabbalistically, you probably know more than I do. I know that the beards have
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of meaning, but they're definitely called hadrat panim, the glory of a person's face. A beard is an important thing. It's definitely an important thing. We have to be very careful about the beard. We don't shave it off. We don't like with a razor. Um, I'm not too much into Kabbalistic stuff. I know that there's like the 5 points of the beard, but there's also 28 this
The
and
the
that.
13
I'm
the
13.
13
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
aware. Like I just know, like as a person who takes care of my mustache, each millimeter of the mustache is a different region that grows at its own pace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me 3 years to get to this point. Like you have to wait out the
Mm-hmm.
itchiness and just push through and push
Mm-hmm.
through. So I mean that's a nice thing, but which has its, I guess, more like its values of suffer
Mm-hmm.
now for something
But the Ju-
greater.
but the but the
Fine,
Jewish
but
but the Jewish beard, I mean, the Jewish beard is a real thing. That for me was
yeah,
the biggest sort of insight is that like when I started growing my beard, I didn't realize that I
mhm,
was actually tapping in to a Jewish vein.
yeah,
That like
yeah.
that it's like a Jewish thing. Like people will be like, "Oh, you look like a Viking. You know, you have such a beard. You look like a Viking." And it's like, "No, I look like a Jew."
Right, right. No, I mean I'm waiting for the beard to grow back. Like I had a really nice
Mhm.
beard. I don't think I'll grow it out
Mhm.
like yours. That's a really long,
Mhm.
nice beard. But I like a nice beard. I think that it's appropriate. You'll take yourself seriously when you have a beard like that. Like it's
Mhm.
more than just what I do. It's who I am. Like I have
Yeah,
a job, but when you have your beard, it's part of who you are. It's how you
you
show
know that
yourself to the
that
world.
for me was actually a big healing because it's like growing a beard was like a way that I could just let my body be because
Yeah.
so much of growing up with my body, growing up in a secular, beauty worshiping kind of like Greek value system is like, you need to have six pack abs and like, you need to work on your body and you need to look good. And it's like this constant emphasis, and then people go crazy with it. They get surgery, they start cutting themselves. You know what I'm saying? Or starving themselves, or their body's
Yeah.
disgusting. So then they need to punish their body, and it was like growing a beard was a way that I could actually just
Of
start letting my
letting
body
go.
be,
Yeah, you
letting
just
it
let it
go.
go. Let it grow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
really actually allowed me to like let go of that shame around my body.
I hear. I hear. That's a
Yeah.
beautiful point. I never thought about it like that. It's a beautiful point because
Yeah.
I do take care of the beard. I think that's also important. I remember early on, my brother, one of my brothers was said something about like the Chabad approach to beards, which I'm not too familiar with, but I know that they don't touch it. They just let it grow. And like so you don't touch it because you don't want to focus on your physicality too much by
Mhm.
being preoccupied with taking care of your beard. And I remember my father saying that's not our way. Like, I'll respect
Mhm.
the Chabad. I'm not saying like our
Well,
philosophy in our
the
family is
Kohen had to groom his beard.
yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
Kohen
And we're
Gadol
we're
had.
Kohanim. We're
Yeah, they
Kohanim.
had to actually look presentable. They even had to trim their beard, obviously not with a razor and not their peyot, but
Right.
they had to look presentable.
No, they say the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, had a daily haircut.
Mhm.
Every day. You gotta
Yeah.
look good. Yeah, Zikan
Yeah.
Aharon sheyored al pi medotav. One of the few mentions of people's beards in Tanakh is Aaron's beard. My great 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 grandfather.
Mhm. Can you translate that into English?
Um, the it's actually let me get the full verse because I botched it up. There's the first part about oil that goes down the beard.
Okay, you're talking about Hine Matovu Manayim
Yes, inem
Shepetachim
atov
Gam
u'manayim
Yachad.
shevet achim gam yachad. So here's the verse. Free translation. I'm reading the Hebrew. Kashemen hatov ala rosh, just like good oil on the head, basically the scented oil. Yored al hazakan, which goes down to your beard. Zikan aharon, the beard of Aaron. Sheyored al pi midotav, that goes down, that flows down in measure. Yeah, and it's a funny image because I'm just thinking right now. there's a lot of Egyptian paintings of people with what looks like a bump from the cartoon. You get hit on your head, and that this thing grows. That's sitting on their head. That's actually a chunk of wax with scented oils that slowly melts and makes things smell good. Like I don't think Aaron was wearing that, but that's what comes to mind when
But
I think
so
about it.
wait, so are you telling me that they used oil in their hair and beard, like our ancestors used oil in their hair and beard?
Apparently, I mean, Aaron wore what's called the Shemen HaMishcha, which is the anointing oil. So anointing oil is one of the things that only the high priest can use, or when the king is anointed, he's anointed with oil, right?
Right. So
That's what
that was,
Mashiach
but is
means.
that what this specific Tehillim is talking about, or is that something else?
Um, I believe it is. I mean, the basic commentaries, like Rashi,
So
for
he's
example,
saying that.
says this is the anointing oil that Aaron was anointed
Hmm.
with. That's what it's talking about.
So when it says Shemen al Harosh, it's talking about that Aaron is anointed with an oil that goes down his head into his beard.
Yeah, it's like it's dripping down. I mean, it's picturesque, it's like
Right.
you see it, it's glistening. And the
Hmm.
beautiful thing is the continuation of the verse actually says that is like the Ketal Hermon, like the dew of of the Hermon, the snowy mountains, which
Hmm.
flows down to the mountains of Zion. That's where God commanded the blessing, for eternal life. And that's a beautiful metaphor if you see the Hermon with the snow melting,
Hmm.
right? Which one of the
Hmm.
nicknames for the Hermon is the white beard.
Wow. So it's like
It's a
to
local thing.
unpack this,
Yeah.
it's like the unity of brothers is like this really is like oil flowing down on the high priest's hair into his beard, which is like snow melting on Mount Hermon.
Going down to bring the blessing to Mount Zion, to Jerusalem. So it's flowing down, it's connecting. Yeah, that's a beautiful insight because it's talking about the pleasantness of brotherly brothers living together and
Mm-hmm.
working together. It's like
Mm-hmm.
loving each other, like
Wow,
Moshe
this
and
is what
Aaron.
the Aleph male is about.
See,
This
now
is
I
what
want it. Now I have to hear more about that.
do you so basically it's like, I mean, the whole concept of the Aleph male is it's brotherhood that's bringing blessing down, and specifically in the context of being a B'Tselem Elohim man, being like a Jewish man who's made in the image of God. And that, like, the alpha male, the whole alpha male shtick is that it's like being the top dog, right? It's like being at the top of the pyramid, at the top of the hierarchy,
Hmm.
right? And what do we say? We say how good and pleasant it is when brothers sit together in peace, meaning they're not trying to one up each other. They're not trying to dominate each other. They're
You
not
know,
trying to, like, you know, go ahead. What
so
were you gonna say?
what comes to mind is it's a good place to sort of wrap up right before Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Is specifically this point: the role that the Kohanim, the priests, play in Hanukkah is in stark contrast to Greek competition, because perhaps the most dangerous aspect of the Greek culture, idolatry, fornicate, whatever, that's easy to call out. The subtle idea of competition for glory is perhaps the most antagonistic idea to the Jewish concept of glory, which comes through Aaron. Aaron manifests Hod. Kabbalistically, Hod means glory. But the glory of Aaron is the fact that he loves everybody and has no place in his heart for competition. That's why he can wear the breastplate with all of the stones representing all the tribes. Nobody else can do that because Aaron is an Ohev Shalom V'Rodef Shalom. He loves this unity, this wholesomeness, and that's what he pursues. It's
Mm-hmm.
the complete opposite of Greek glory through crushing somebody else, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
that's
That's
not
right.
olive crushing,
Achilles and Agamemnon and Odysseus were always talking about winning honor and glory. They
right?
they wanted their face to be up in Times Square.
And that's a big part of the West. And I think that the Jewish message to the West is not that.
Yeah.
It's not to be the alpha; it's to be the aleph. I like that.
Right.
I like
Also
that.
the Aleph is silent. The Aleph is silent. The Aleph holds space.
Wow, wow.
Um Wow, yeah. So, wow, that conversation just opened up another thread. Okay, Nachliel, the museum guy, how can people find you?
The museum guy. Just put that into
On
any platform, you'll find me.
Instagram, Facebook?
Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, my website, YouTube.
Okay.
Got lots of different things
Okay, and you have a Hanukkah tour coming up,
in the Israel Museum
and you do private tours?
all the time. Different
Okay.
Israel Museum, Bible Lands Museum, different museums around the country. I just came back from almost 2.5 weeks in Miami and in New York, where I was engaging with the Jewish community. No big museums in Miami, but I went into classrooms and went into communities, and I present there using Google Earth, virtual tours, archaeology, and I was
Mhm.
guiding at the Met in New York City.
Mhm.
Many three tours a day, Hanukkah tour, ancient Egypt tour, and I travel once or twice a year. I travel out of Israel to engage with the Jewish community to reconnect through museums. And in Israel, I also have a homeschooling community that meets about once a month in different museums around the country. And we have virtual tours in English and Hebrew several different times a week, every week. So
Can
throughout the
can
year.
adults attend that homeschool?
For sure, for sure. I mean, I have a lot of the parents who participate and enjoy. I do
Mhm.
virtual tours for adults as well. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Would
there's
you
a
be
lot of
willing to
different
come up to
ways.
the Golan? I would love to do.
Well, my brother lives in the Golan, and I haven't seen him in a while. He hasn't seen my daughter yet, so we hope to visit there
I would
in
love to do, like, the
January
ancient museum with you or something like that.
for sure. So I might be coming in January, maybe early
Okay.
February, but
So
I have it in the calendar.
maybe we can do, like, a
And
museum guy tour of,
so I'm coming for like my wife and I are basically going on vacation for a few days, but there is a museum there that I want to visit, and to
mhm.
I'd be happy to go around. So we'll be in touch. I might be
Okay,
visiting
sounds good.
Akivot Ba'emek, Footsteps in the Valley, which is further south. That's in
Okay,
the Beth Shan Valley on the way up,
sure.
but also in the Golan. I mean, there's plenty. There's
Yeah,
plenty.
awesome. Alright. Thank you, Nachiel, so much.
So, wow, this has been
Nachiel, the museum guy, Aleph Mail podcast. Peace in,
amazing.
peace out, and shalom.
All right, till we do this next
Alright.
time in person. All right,
Yeah, let's do it next time in person. Bye, man. Thank you very much.
all right. Take care.
Okay. Bye.